Welcome, everyone, to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior and neurolinguistic practitioner specializing in anger management issues, both court appointed and private, marriage and relationship coaching, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group setting. If you need any assistance, reach out to DNB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Now, in today's fifth episode of season 35, I'm very excited to have Ara Trembly discussing the importance of not judging a book by its cover, whether that judgment is based on appearance, religion, political belief, financial status, or any of the main characteristics that makes each person unique. As human beings, we are naturally inclined to form quick impressions and create narratives about people we have only just met, often deciding within moments whether they are worthy of our time, attention, or energy. However, meaningful connections are built when we move beyond assumptions and allow ourselves to truly get to know the person behind the surface. Now, consider this. You will not want others to make premature judgment about you based solely on limited information. So if we desire to be understood of who we generally are, we should extend the same courtesy and openness to others. So, without further ado, and as with all of our previous episodes, I'll leave it to the guest to probably introduce himself as no one else can do a better job. Ara, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, and thanks for having me here. It's a privilege to be on your podcast. And yes, my name is Ara Tremblay. I am a psychotherapist and Christian counselor. Been in practice for 20 years or so, and I'm the author of two books. The latest of which is called Dreaming God's Way. That's Dreaming God's Way, and it's a book that's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all over the place. It's all over the web. So Dreaming God's Way is always available. And it's interesting that you're talking about not judging a book by its cover, because my book Dreaming God's Way has a beautiful cover of a Blake painting of Jacob's ladder from the Bible. But I don't want people to judge it by that, although I think that will attract them. The reason that I'm here today is to talk about what's in the book, but really talk about people, to talk about dreams. We don't judge a book by its cover. We don't judge ourselves really by just what we do in our conscious life, but what happens in our unconscious life as well. And that's why a book like this is so important, because dreams are a window into the unconscious mind.
Absolutely. Well, it is a pleasure, Ara, to have you here today, especially that you and we share the same career as psychotherapists. And I just like to be able to get more into not necessarily the clinical aspect as to why it is so much of human nature for people to just kind of cast judgment on people that we just met, either, like I mentioned, either by their religion belief or by their appearance or financial status and so on and so forth. But then when does intuition comes in? When we have some feeling that the connection with that person is not really a genuine connection, or that person may not be authentic, or they may be
Mhm.
narcissistic in nature. How do we differentiate what our inner voice tells us versus what our judgment tells us about the other person?
Yeah, yeah. And that really, for me, that all depends on where your judgment is coming from. And you're right. That there have been many psychology studies to show that we form instant impressions of people, and sometimes those impressions are correct, but often they are wrong. So we have to be able to say, that as Jesus did, that we should treat others the way we want to be treated. So we don't want to be treated just because you and I meet. You don't like my shirt. Uh, you think I don't want anything to do with this guy. He wears bad shirts. Uh, we don't want that to happen. We don't want anything like that. Like those instant snap judgments to happen. But I think the kind of intuition you're talking about is something that goes beyond just an initial impression. You're talking about, you meet a person, maybe you talk to him or her for a little while, um, and you just but during the whole conversation, something is saying, no, something's not right here. Something's not genuine here. Um, those are the things that I think we should listen to. We should listen to our inner judgment because that's our unconscious mind trying to tell us something. And ironically, often the unconscious mind will reveal whatever that is if we don't get it right away. It might reveal that to us in a dream. So these are things to pay attention to. And of course, when we have, if especially if we have a dream about it, our mind is telling us this is important, and we need to take a closer look at this and this person and what this relationship is all about. Um, so so the key, I think, is this a lasting impression? It lasts more than a second or two when you meet the person. Is it a lasting impression? I think that's kind of the test of, okay, now there's something going on in my unconscious mind. I have to pay attention to that.
But then again, not many have the ability, Ara, to be able to have that gift in being able to see something off about the other person. And yeah, we may have all intuition. We may all have that
Hmm.
inner voice that tells us to be careful about that person. But then yet again, we may feel that, oh, okay, you know what? I feel comfortable with the person, and that person
Hmm.
eventually disappoints you. So now, for all the
Hmm.
subsequent relationship that you have, you're always going to be on your guard. So then does that mean
Hmm.
being extra cautious about every interaction you have with others? Or does your mental ability to be able to determine if that person will be causing you harm, now suddenly you're being extra careful about whoever you encounter?
Yeah, it's a really good question because in the world we have today, I mean the internet, the web is a great example. People are all the time representing themselves in a certain way, as a certain person with certain abilities, with certain things to offer, and often these things are lies. And it's gotten to the point now where we almost expect lies from people,
Mm.
whether it be online or in person. We expect them to lie, and that's not necessarily a good thing for us. But it's not surprising, given the state of the world today. It's not surprising that we expect people to lie or prevaricate or at least make themselves look better than they really are. And again, as you said, I think we do really all do have that intuition that tells us, no, something's not right here. I think all of us have that. Every one of us has that. Um, I've never met a person who said, nah, I don't have that. That never happens for me. Um, but another factor here is time. As I said before, if my impression of you is based on my an 8-second meeting with you, that's not a very grounded impression. It's not, it's grounded in whatever has gone on before, whatever you look like some guy. My uncle used to know who was a criminal, so you must be a criminal. It might be that kind of thing going on with instant judgment. So, but time is the key. If I can get time with you, I can sit with you and talk with you for, 15 minutes, half an hour. And look, if somebody's going to be important in your life, you are going to spend time with them and you are going to sit and talk. And that's where you get to get to know them more fully and get to see them more fully and get to see how they react to you and how you feel about what's going on between the two of you. So time is really a key.
But yes, that I agree. But at the same time, Ara, when we see that time is a very valuable commodity that not many people can really, like invest too much time on, and we look the same as well in relationships where people
Mhm.
always have that FOMO effect, the fear of missing out. So they really not
Hmm.
invest too much time on one person because they say to themselves, if I invest time on that one, I may lose the opportunity to be able to meet someone else or to interact with someone that's going to bring me a bit more value. So then it's always about what's in it for me. And this is what a lot of people
Hmm.
base themselves on when they meet someone else in their lives, either related
Hmm.
for romantic purposes, for business, whatever it is. But then again, how can we um, look at time with a different perspective, as time is the fourth dimensional, okay, when we look at the time and space continuum, and we kind of focus too much on the time that we lose today, how can we get it back? And we know we cannot get back time, but sometimes we can
Mhm.
compress the time and we can expedite relationship to try to figure out if that one is valuable to me at this given moment.
Mhm. Right. And time is in a sense a commodity because it's something we spend. Okay, just like we spend money.
That's correct.
And so it's reasonable to ask, should I be spending my time? Should I be spending this valuable commodity that I only have so much of? And I don't even know how much I have. I could be dead tomorrow.
Correct.
So, so, uh, so time is a commodity to be spent, and we need to exercise good judgment in how we spend our time. And that's really what it comes down. That's where the judgment comes in. How am I going to spend my time? You know, am I going to spend hours getting to know, somebody online because I think they'll give me some likes on my website? Probably not. No, that's not how I want to spend my time. But am I going to spend time uh, talking with someone at my church that needs help and might I might be able to strike up a relationship with them and help them out? Yes, I'm going to spend that time because that's valuable time. So how you spend your time really comes back to what you value in your life and who you value in your life. If your attitude is what's in it for me, then you're only going to spend your time on things that you think will profit you somehow. And we all have a tendency to do that at times, but I think that can't be primarily where we're coming from because if it is, the relationships we have will be transactional and shallow and ultimately meaningless.
Yeah, and this is unfortunately this is what we see a lot nowadays, especially as you mentioned earlier about the internet and how people interact with each other. And as you and I know, being in the field of
Mm,
psychotherapy, 90% of the things that you see online are just fake or lies or misdirection.
mhm,
It is so. But then again, when we look at the how can I say this? When someone is going through trauma, like PTSD or childhood trauma, whatever it is, and when they basically go from either one relationship to the other, like when they deal with PTRS, which is post-traumatic relationship syndrome, and we see that if let's say they've been in toxic relationship in the past, and then they fall into another toxic relationship, they should know the signs, but yet a lot of people tend to feel comfort in that kind of relationship. So they repeat the same mistake over and over again. So how
mhm.
can you really explain when someone have dealt with past trauma, they're aware of this person having a narcissistic behavior, but yet they stay in that environment because this is what they're most accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, what you say, there's a lot to what you say there because, when I've dealt, for example, with children who've been removed from their homes because of abuse, those children will scream bloody murder at being removed from those homes, even though they were abused physically, sexually, even otherwise, because that's what they know. That's what's familiar to them. That's what they think is normal. And you talk, and it's often, and I think you alluded to this, the things that we do are often, the choices that we make are often related to trauma that we've experienced in our own lives. I'm thinking of a dream that I interpret in the book I mentioned, Dreaming God's Way, in which one of my patients had a dream. This was a middle-aged woman whose parents had divorced during her adolescence. Her father had just walked out. So that her experience of men was they walk out on you. And sure enough, she married a man, and within a few years of they had three children together, and then he walked out. So the same thing happened. And so her dream after this walking out, her dream in therapy with me, her dream was a brief dream was this. She says, "I'm walking at twilight down a long row of trees toward a cheerful, brightly lit house at the end of a country lane. As I draw near, I can hear children playing, and through a large picture window, I can see a loving couple doing ordinary things, conversing, setting the table, or embracing. I press my face to the window and watch their happiness with great longing, but I am invisible to them and must leave before the night falls. This was such a powerful dream for her, and it was a picture of her life, a picture of what she longed for and what she could not have. And the night falling to her was her falling into deep depression. But the good news is that we were working with her, working through this and realizing that, just because you had this experience during your childhood and just because you had a bum of a first husband doesn't mean that that has to continue. And she is now in a stable long-term marriage and very happy. And this dream, which was persistent, has gone away.
But then again, unfortunately, none of us have this famous crystal ball that can allow us to see into an unforeseen future. And we tend to kind of like always trust other people blindly in some cases. And we kind of like not realize that there are some red flags, there are some green flags, but sometimes we
Hmm.
have to balance out both. How many green flags do we see in that person, and how many red flags? And if the green flags supersede those red, then this is something that
Mm,
you consider. But no one can see into that future 5, 10 years that this person, if we take the same example as you just shared,
mm,
was going to leave her like her father left her and her family. It's, I mean, 52% of the marriages end up in divorce era. So the thing is that,
mhm.
so do we really screw up on our judgment of others?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we screw up on our judgments of others. That happens all the time. But there are other times when we're right about our judgments of others. And it's again, I'll get back to what I said before, which is that time is a huge factor. I remember a woman that I knew that I worked with was starting to date a man, and she was just crazy about this guy, and she thought he had hung the moon. She just thought he was wonderful, and but she said her grandmother had given her this advice about what to do. Should she rush ahead and become involved with this man and become engaged to this man. But the grandmother said, summer them and winter them, meaning let it go on at least a year and see how things go. See what he's like, when he meets your family. See what it's like when you meet his family. See what it's like when you go places together. See what it's like when there's trouble. Time is the factor. Time is what is really what helps us to establish trust or to build trust in others. Um, and it's the one, I have a number of clients, I'm sure you do too, where there's been infidelity in a marriage. And what I tell them all the same thing, which is, they say, how can we the offending party will say, "How can I rebuild the trust?" And I will always say, "Time is your friend. You want more of that time to show that you really are the guy or the girl who can be true and really loves this person and really wants to build something." So time is the key. Time is always the key, and time will we things judged over time are much more likely to be correct than things judged instantly, as you said, by judging a book by its cover.
Okay, so let me put you in a challenging question here, Ira. The question is that if, let's say, we see people who are married, divorced, married, divorced, married, divorced several times, and they all
Hmm.
say that, you know what, I made the wrong choices many, many times, and every man that I met are not really the right men, or any woman that I met
Hmm.
really the right one. But then again, we have the common denominator concept or principle, where if a person gets married and divorced multiple times, they are the common denominator as to why relationship has not really succeeded.
Hmm.
So can people just have a good look at themselves, and instead of judging others, they have to start judging themselves?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and that's what Jesus said. He said, before you go talking about the speck in your friend's eye, take a look at the log that's in your own eye. The the problems that you have, and it's a good, especially for people like us who are therapists. It's really important because we can't let when people bring up various problems in therapy, especially if they're problems that we've had or that we've had to deal with in others, we can't let our experience get in the way of seeing what's going on with them. Okay, we can't let our experience color that. So it's really, really important to hear and be heard. And yes, our old stuff is going to come up. It's inevitable. But again, as I said, but over time, we'll see whether, all right, was I right about this or was I wrong? Um, Again, I think that's the way it happens.
And but then again, at the same time, Ara, when we look at how people look at themselves and we're all by nature, we're very good self-critics, right? We always kind of say, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not like smart enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. So we tend to always self-criticize ourselves, but then at the same time, we try to balance out this self-critics by criticizing others because we feel that we need somehow to be able to give at least ourselves a good tap in the shoulder that we have done something good in our lives. So then at this point, is there a process, like a step that when we start judging others, can we try to stop for a moment and say, what, who am I to judge that person? Who am I to be
Mhm.
jump too quickly into conclusion without, like you said, giving the time to be able to get to know them? But then isn't that done subconsciously?
Yeah, well, if the judging is done both consciously and subconsciously, unfortunately, and the subconscious stuff will tend to arise out of your own history, out of your own childhood, and a lot of times out of your own trauma, and you're not always going to be aware of you're not instantly anyway. But if you did as you suggest, and sit and think about this, and wait a minute, what's going on? Who am I to be the judge over this person? That's when you can say, oh yeah, yeah, hasn't this happened to me? Haven't I been this person? And haven't I acted like that, or am I not guilty of the same thing? That's where it's interesting. When we work with clients, and many of them who have to work on forgiving somebody, usually a parent, but sometimes a spouse, or sometimes a child. But it's usually, but when we work on forgiveness, the one of the first things we ask the person who has to work on forgiveness is, what do you need to be forgiven for? And it takes them aback because they're thinking, I'm the aggrieved party here. I'm the injured. What are you talking about? Yeah, what do you mean? What do I need to be forgiven? But if you do that, if you can be humble enough to say, there are things in my life that I need to be forgiven for too. There are things that I regret in my life and I wish I could be forgiven for. Um, if we can get to that point, then we can say, okay, now, hey, or if we're praying, if we're praying to God, and Lord just says, you've forgiven me, I want to forgive this person. I want to forgive others. And as it's been said many times that when forgiveness takes place, the prisoner is set free, and the prisoner is the person who's doing the forgiving.
But isn't it like in a way at the same time that it's society, it's what people around us. I mean, based like as we mentioned earlier in childhood trauma, we have lived in a society where we became a prisoner of our own mind. We have become
Mm-hmm.
basically secluded or isolated, just like in the pandemic, where this has been done for decades, centuries even, to be able to think this way. Because like when we were young in school, we had to raise our hand to be able to ask for permission to do anything. So at the same time, that causes us to always feel like we are in a cage. And obviously, we do not want to feel or we do not want to stay in that cage. We want to be freed, not just by the requirement of our society, but the requirement of ourselves. And that in itself causes us to be able to put ourselves on a pedestal higher than others. And that's the reason why we judge people.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what you say is true, but I've also seen people who have a very low opinion of themselves, but are still very willing to judge others. So I think the tendency to judge others is across the board. I really do. And look, it's not the proverb says we should make judgments about others. That we should judge things. It's part of being wise to judge things, to look at what's in front of you and judge whether that's a good or bad thing. So it's not a bad thing that you're judging something, but to be judgmental, which just means to condemn somebody else, that's a whole other thing. And that's where you say, well, who are you to condemn me? All right. Indeed. And that's what God said to Job. Who are you? Who are you? Were you around when I created the world? Because guess what, Job? You're just someone who came later, and you need to realize that I'm the creator of the universe, and I'm going to do things my way, which is it's a humbling thing to hear. But people will do things their own way, uh, and uh, and they will judge regardless of their histories, and some will judge more harshly, as you and I well know.
But then again, okay, so if let's say we go in and deal with people that are narcissistic in nature, and then we know there's like a lot of different spectrum of narcissism. So that in itself, as we know, they lack vasopressin in their mind or in the, and they do not know, they do not show any empathy. But then these people obviously will kind of
Mhm.
like always tend to judge others because they need to value themselves. And that is based on a childhood that they were reprimanded for everything they did. So they built their personality based on that, and that in itself causes them to
Mm.
always judge others. And of course, we need to be like the only kind of couple that works together is a narcissistic and an empath. These are the two couple that actually can work because one will always give all their energy to that narcissistic person, and that narcissistic will always absorb that positive energy because this is how they feel better about themselves. So
Mm.
when it comes to that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of narcissistic people out there. There's a lot of people with a high ego, but then you mentioned something about even those with low self-esteem, they will tend to judge others. But then
Mhm.
that's kind of a paradox due to the fact that if someone has a low self-esteem, they focus too much their energy on the things that they go wrong with, the things that they don't give value to themselves enough to be able to not
Mm.
even have the time to judge others.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think that what happens is if we are, if I've seen this with kids when I work with kids, if a kid is bullied, at wherever, at school, at his church, um, sooner or later he'll find somebody to bully himself so that he can say, "See, all right, this was done to me. Now I'm going to do it to others."
Hmm.
Because it makes me feel good. It makes me one up on that person. You know, I'm making them feel bad, so I'm better than they are, and that's really what's involved. It's that really kind of uh, let's let's uh, let's cut the legs out from someone else to make ourselves feel better. And unfortunately, we see that a lot.
And so, what would be your because we're getting very close to this end of the podcast, and I would wish that we would have more than a couple of hours to talk about that because this I'm very passionate about this topic. So what
Yes.
I would say advice as a psychotherapist would you give to our listeners out there who are tend to always go towards judging someone, as you said, without taking the time to really to get to know the person. But then again, they will come with the excuse to say, well, I'm listening to my inner voice kind of thing with the air
Mhm.
gets between the word inner voice. So when is that inner voice should be put a priority versus looking at ourselves to say, hey, it seems like this inner
Mhm.
always popping up, and that gives you an excuse to be able to judge others.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I often say to clients, because uh, we we tend to react in one of two ways, really. We tend to react to things logically, or we tend to react emotionally. Okay, and the emotional reactions involve emotions, and emotions are often not logical. Okay. So when what I tell people is, especially, when you're making judgments about others and you feel the emotion involved, there's something pushing at you. Um, there's something there, but is it logical for you to just toss them away out of hand without really knowing what that is? Oh, it's just some feeling, something in butterflies in my stomach, whatever it is. No, it's not logical. So I tell people, listen to your logical self. And people really relate to that. when they hear that, they say, "Oh yeah." So what would your logical self, or what would your logic, if you had a friend, if you do have a friend who's very down to earth and logical, what would he or she tell you about this? And suddenly the perspective changes. Suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute. Does that make any sense? Does it even make any sense to be judging this person this way? And once you start asking those questions, then you get down to the nitty gritty, and you know whether this is what I'm seeing is really what I think I'm seeing or not. Does it make, in other words, does it make sense?
But so what would say in your practice era, what would say the percentage of patient that comes to you and that are, bluntly telling you that, hey, I'm judging others. How can you fix me? What kind of modality would be the best? Either CBT, DBT, EMDR, or whatever
Mm,
else, to be able to treat, or I will not say treat, but basically manage those judgment spells.
yeah. So usually those are the patients that need to forgive somebody for something. That's why they come. Uh, People who think that other people owe them something, and that they are the ones who need to forgive other people, but they're also the ones who think, oh yeah, I have it. I'm holding this. There's a reason we call it holding a grudge. I'm holding this. I have something against you. It's almost like I have power over you. And the way I work on those things is mainly through psychodynamic therapy. So what's happening for me is I'm looking at your childhood, I'm looking at particularly at your traumas, but I'm also looking at your happy times, and I'm looking to say, did this feel, and what were those times? I get them to describe them to me, and when was the last time you felt that great joy or that great depression? And suddenly everything makes sense to them, because the one thing I will say is, and I'm sure you've seen this too in your therapy, it's one thing to use CBT and get people to do to watch their behavior and question it, but it's another thing to be able to say, here's why you act the way you act, and that's what they want to know. They want to know why I'm acting this way. It's okay that hey, in some cases I can hypnotize a person and stop a behavior, but that doesn't get at the root cause. So people want to know why. And that's why I do the psychodynamic therapy, because that's what it goes after.
That's absolutely true. So we have 1 minute because you tell people where they can find your book.
Okay. Yeah, please. My book is Dreaming God's Way. They can find it, as I said, on Amazon. They can find it on Barnes and Noble. They can find it on iTunes. It's on all the places online. It's just Dreaming God's Way, a biblically informed guide through the fascinating world of our dreams. And it includes, by the way, step-by-step process for interpreting dreams that doesn't take the form of a dream dictionary, which is where there are lots of them out there, and they're complete nonsense, because everyone's dream, the symbols in everyone's dream are meaning to them. The meaning to them of those symbols is personal. So
Absolutely.
a cross doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. It means Jesus to me, but it might mean a crossroads to you. So it's very important. So we don't use that method. We use the biblical method of dream interpretation, and I think you'll find it works well.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Era, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. And again, thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we all appreciate your participation to this episode by expressing how important it is to take time to know others and to not let our narcissistic judgment on others to take over and allow time to get to know people before jumping too quickly into what feels good to us. Now, to our millions of listeners out there, we hope that you've enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. And also, we're very excited for what's ahead in season 35 of the Happiness Journey with Dr. Den podcast, featuring a lineup of incredible guests with potential stories that will continue to uplift and inspire all of you. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Every person you meet carries a story, a journey, and experiences that cannot be seen at first glance. When we judge others based on physicality or other surface level characteristic, we risk overlooking the very qualities that make them remarkable. True understanding comes from taking the time to listen, learn, and appreciate who someone is beneath the surface. The strongest friendship, relationship, and opportunities often emerge when we move beyond assumptions and embrace curiosity. Respect is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another human being, regardless of our differences. Before creating a narrative about someone, give them the chance to share their own story. Treat others with the same kindness, dignity, and openness that you hope to receive in return. So when we replace judgment with understanding, we create a world where genuine connection can flourish. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life. Stay tuned for our next episode.